The DLC for Callisto Protocol was recently released, and it seems only fitting to try and cover it. If you do not, however, know the story of the main game of Callisto Protocol, we covered the entire story of the base game when it was released, so be sure to go and check that out and then come back here for the DLC breakdown. I will, however, give a very brief summary of the final events of Callisto Protocol as a refresher for anyone that may have seen it back then but are a little bit hazy on the details. At the conclusion of the story, Jacob sent Danny into space in the only remaining escape pod after giving her the tube containing the parasite that is responsible for infecting everybody at the prison, while also having a memory link with her, allowing her to know everything that Jacob found out during his time at Black Iron Prison, the parasites, and what the United Jupiter Company, better known as the UJC, were doing there. You could have been easily fooled into thinking that Jacob died in the final moments of Callisto Protocol after his valiant sacrifice, but we wouldn't have this DLC if that were the case, would we? So, the Callisto Protocol final transmission takes place directly after Jacob is greeted by Dr. Caitlin Marler and Leon Ferris at the end of the base game. Alright, let's get into the story. We begin as Jacob awakes to the voice of Dr. Marler, pleading with him to wake up. Jacob is understandably shaken and confused about where he is. Marla tells him that he needs to find her in the laboratory, which is nearby, and she will explain everything once he gets there. The entire place is crawling with infected zombies and creatures, so Jacob needs to get back to what he does best, and that's a whole lot of shooting and some chopping. Once he reaches a nearby elevator, Jacob takes the time to ask Marla what happened to Ferris, and why he can't remember how he got here in the first place. She puts it down to dissociative amnesia, that his mind is protecting itself following the events of when he saved Danny. And look, from a personal perspective, and all the crazy crap that Jacob has seen over the course of the story thus far, the fact he has somehow now gotten amnesia from whatever happened after saving Danny and didn't somehow get amnesia from everything beforehand is absolutely mind-blowing. If it were me, I would probably be in a ball in some vent somewhere just drooling. Jacob ends up finding himself back within the laboratory of Dr. Marler, which contains Patient Zero. And if you remember, he was a former UJC colonist and had the unique ability to synthesize the biophage pathogen while also retaining his humanity. He was the catalyst used to recreate the outbreak in Black Iron Prison, ultimately dubbed the Callisto Protocol. What's interesting is that Dr. Marler is nowhere to be seen, but she does tell Jacob to find a console and open up a part of her laboratory. Once inside, we find a hologram Marler walking around. She tells Jacob that they need to hurry and that there is still a chance. Jacob points out that none of this makes any sense, while Marla tells him that it's just his mind playing tricks since he's been through a terrible trauma. Jacob isn't having any of it. He asks Marla what changed, after she told him earlier that there's no escape for her, seemingly accepting her fate and punishment for what she did at Black Iron Prison earlier. She tells him that after seeing what he was willing to do, it made her change her mind. That she still regrets what she's done, but they have to keep fighting. They need to finish this. Before telling Jacob that there is an escape ship waiting for them and to meet her at the loading bay, she plans on escaping Callisto with her research, what she considers to be the most precious cargo of all, mentioning that Jacob gave Danny a piece of the puzzle, but if they recover them all, they can expose Cole and put a stop to his plans. Jacob reluctantly agrees to one last job. Now, there are many audio logs and data-specific things that can be found throughout the rest of the journey, all of which contain information that Marla wishes to take with us on the escape ship. I will be explaining what the information is at the end of the video for some specific reasons that you will understand shortly, but do understand that Jacob is finding these things along the way. Once downstairs in the cell area, we can see that Jacob is having a hallucination of Elias, entering in different rooms while being contrasted with creatures running past. This brings sudden confusion to Jacob as Elias turns into a creature when approached. Upon killing it, the hallucination proceeds further, as we can see a dead Elias with writing on the wall saying that it's Jacob's fault. After turning around, more words appear on the wall such as murderer and give up, showing that there is something clearly wrong with Jacob's mind. The area is filled with biophages, a mixture of robotic and parasitic creatures. Marla mentions that they are considered dangerous and that Jacob should avoid them at all costs. Unfortunately, she doesn't know how terrible I am with stealth sections, and we get into a fight pretty quickly. Jacob interestingly points out, while crawling through a vent, that quite a bit is new within the prison. Marla explains that the prison is changing, and to not let his guard down. A strange thing of note, but something worth remembering. A close call within the vent causes Jacob to fall through it, and presumably loses consciousness. We can hear Elias's voice telling Jacob that he can't keep running from what he has done, playing clearly on the guilt that Jacob feels about transporting the pathogens to Black Iron Prison. Jacob awakes outside the shoe, nearby the loading bay. He is warned once again of the dangers that lurk nearby and not to let his guard down. Many puzzles and creatures later, Jacob continues to get these hallucinations as he is descending a ladder, pointing out that something is wrong. We briefly lose connection to Marla as we head further down. We find a hologram of Duncan Cole, telling Jacob that his escape from prison or escape from himself is impossible, that the only path to freedom is found within. For only knowing yourself can you become what you were always meant to be. As we continue onwards, it's quickly apparent that something very strange is happening. The corridor is repeating itself as Jacob begins reliving the same moment over and over. The same hallway, the same corners, and of course, the same hologram. We do, however, manage to escape the loop after going the opposite way, but once again find ourselves in a type of memory. As Danny proclaims to Jacob that it's no longer about escape, we see a vision of the escape pod that she left in. Jacob reassures himself that what he is seeing is not real, but it's becoming clear that something much more than amnesia is going on here. We regain connection to Marla as Jacob asks her what happened. She mentions that she lost signal and tells Jacob that this area is fraught with challenges, both physical and mental. We finally reach the loading bay as Marla organises a lift for us to take us to our destination. She warns Jacob to prepare himself, that what he is about to see, she is no longer that person. Inside is her special projects lab. She mentions that what she did there is not something for which there can be forgiveness, including what she calls her greatest sin, stating that even though she and Cole took different paths, they both had the same goal in mind. And while she realized the mistakes that she had made, this one ironically could be their last hope. For some ridiculously stupid reason, Jacob approaches it before being grabbed as the biophage tells him that he will never escape. Jacob breaks free using his trademarked baton, but it breaks in the process, essentially the equivalent of Obi-Wan Kenobi breaking his lightsaber. Jacob points out to Marla that the robot said something to him, but she quickly interrupts him, telling him to focus on the goal at hand, finding the data drives and getting to the escape ship. We manage to find a hammer that is essentially our new baton, only way less cool. It is very powerful though, and it makes very short work of biophages, which is nice. As Jacob fights his way through a bunch of infected, it becomes quickly apparent that many of them are hallucinations, while some are actually real, making it incredibly difficult for Jacob to differentiate which is real and which is not. Many hammer swings later, Marla is explaining that we must hurry, and we're running out of time. Jacob is tripping out, stating that the room is changing on its own. We head into the garbage chute and find Marla there. A randomly appearing biophage kills her and throws her into the garbage chute, much to the dismay of Jacob. After killing it, he points out that it doesn't make any sense for Marla to be there, since she should have been on the ship. For what reason did she have to be in the garbage chute? More words begin appearing on the ground, stating that fighting is pointless and to just give up, seemingly the internal thoughts of Jacob that he is fighting with. While descending the ladder to the escape ship, we see more and more of these words appearing on the wall as Jacob begins having memories of the past.
Running for once.
This isn't about escape, Jacob. Not anymore.
I promise you will still kill me.
You never will become clear.
This
We can pay for what he's done.
you made the wrong choice. Now how are you gonna make it right on time?
The approaches. The survivor.
I played my part in all this as well. There's no escape for me.
Blackheart is where I belong.
We enter the loading bay as Marla appears once again within the garbage chute, this time transformed, much like Leon Ferris was. After defeating her, Jacob manages to send her down into the depths of fire. What makes this even more confusing is that Marla once again speaks to Jacob over the radio, pleading with him to hurry and that there is still a chance. Once he enters the escape ship, Jacob quickly realizes that it's his own ship that he arrived on, stating that it can't be, that it's impossible before attempting to take off. It's during the takeoff that we see beyond the facade. As the light from the ship fades to the light given off by a flashlight, we can see that Jacob is being inspected by Dr. Marla, as he begins talking like he is in a dream. Marla does her final report, stating that she found Jacob in the Warden's Tower and dragged him there, that his link to Danny's core is still active. She is using that to upload the full details of the experiment, and while she can't guarantee that it will be received, it's their best hope to get the truth out there and to turn Jacob's sacrifice into an opportunity. As the room begins to crumble, we can hear that the data transfer was complete, as Marla tells Jacob that he did it, telling him that his fight is now done, revealing the extensive injuries that Jacob has sustained. The room crumbles as Marla and Jacob both presumably die. And that ends the game aspect of the final transmission DLC. Now, you might be a little confused as to what the heck happened at the end there, and understandably so let's just get into that first. While it's not mentioned exactly how Jacob gained the injuries that we see him with, we do know that Marla found him in the Warden's Tower and dragged him there to the laboratory. This means that the injuries sustained happened in the moments after he sent Danny into space and sacrificed himself at the end of the base game. The two most likely possibilities are that he received the injuries in the explosion that happened shortly after the Warden's Tower's self-destruction, but if it were that, it would beg the question of how Marla found him after the explosion, or if there was anything of the Warden's Tower actually left. Or the more plausible one is that it was the Alpha, aka Leon Ferris, that ripped Jacob apart after the final scene. Again, how Marla got there before the self-destruction and without being killed by Leon herself is a mystery, but for me, this is more than likely the cause for Jacob's injuries. Marla took Jacob to her lab in order to keep him alive, using him as a pathway to send vital incriminating information to Danny, using the data sync that they both share, which she seemed to successfully achieve in the end. All of the events in the DLC, and I kid you not here, were all a dream. Hallucinations of a dying Jacob as the files of information were being uploaded into his mind so it could be sent to Danny. And do you remember when I mentioned that Jacob finds audio logs throughout the journey? These audio logs are vital information being uploaded into his mind by Marla, so let's get into them. Firstly, the writing seen throughout the game is the internal thoughts and doubts that manifest from Jacob's own mind, largely a projection of his guilt for the part that he played in the infection that took place on Callisto and Europa. There is even an audio log that can be found that is unique to others, with this one being the voice of Jacob. This gives a very big clue that what we're seeing throughout the game is not in fact real, and is likely the real Jacob speaking to himself in confusion in the real world. And as for the rest of this information, it is the data being sent to Danny by Marla, beginning with the history of Callipolis and the madness of Duncan Cole. It begins with a voice confession from Dr. Marla about her involvement in what happened in Black Iron Prison, stating that what happened here cannot be allowed to spread, since the consequences of which would be apocalyptic. Referencing the Black Death, a pandemic caused by the bubonic plague that ravaged much of Europe and parts of North Africa. It talks about a scholar named Roulin Coquart that lived in a small fishing village off the southern coast of France, whom watched his entire village succumb to the plague, even spending 3 days walking the island in search of signs of life, but finding none. He was the only remaining survivor within the fishing village, and since burying them would have been impossible, he built a funeral pyre, which he lit and the sky turned black with smoke. And in that smoke, Coquart had a vision of impending doom, showing that humanity would not last, And while they might survive the plague, extinction was inevitable. Soon after his vision, he wrote a manuscript that translated to Death Makes No Mistakes. It details his vision in the dead smoke and asks the question of why people survive while others do not. Pondering the reason, is it by chance? Or maybe divine providence? Cockart didn't believe in either. See, he theorized about the existence of something called the commonality, a trait neither biological nor spiritual which is shared amongst true survivors. So he believed that the commonality would save humanity, and in order to research it, he created a secret cabal, taking inspiration from his favorite philosopher Plato, and naming the group Callipolis. Within his manuscript, he outlined the tradition of the Great Hunt, or the hunting of human prey. He believed it to be a religious duty, that it's one's burden to perform it, an act to demonstrate their willingness to go to great lengths to understand survival at its absolute core, not to mention what it means to kill the weak to find the strong among them. So, essentially survival of the fittest was the group's way of honouring the commonality of survivors, and what happened at Black Iron Prison was no different, with the alpha being the one true strong survivor, and the weak continuing to perish. During the Great Hunt, hunters would don masks. Many of the Callipolis hunters were high-ranking members of society and wanted to keep their true identity a secret. And while most masks are created with intimidation in mind, these were not. Instead designed to make the hunters appear as philosopher kings that they truly believed themselves to be. While a group named the Archivists were created to meticulously detail every detail of the hunt, seeking to find proof behind the commonality, much like a religious scholar seeking definitive proof of God. They knew it existed, but failed to define it. Now, if you remember the group of people that were speaking to Cole at the end of Callisto Protocol, these were the Archivists, detailing the Great Hunt, this particular hunt taking place at Black Iron Prison. Callipolis remained a secret society, performing the Great Hunt in secret and studying the survivors in secret. However, this would change in 1919 with the publication of On the Survival of Man, written by a Callipolis member, Oliver Ledoux. In this book, he challenged the theory that humanity's extinction would be at the hand of some catastrophic outside force, such as a plague, like the bubonic plague mentioned earlier. Instead, he believed that humanity's greatest risk was humanity itself. After watching how the Industrial Revolution changed the world and the population growth hit a terrifying pace as a result, believing that evolution without a guiding hand was the real threat to mankind, and it was Callipolis' responsibility and duty to tend to humanity like a gardener would his garden. You need to cull the weak to ensure that humanity grew strong. His writings were received well within Callipolis. Many would share his fear of humanity being overrun by the unworthy and weak, and since those within Callipolis had been studying survival for centuries, their research had shown them that survivors were not determined by race, gender, or even sexual preference, but instead their personal connection to the commonality. Ledoux dubbed himself and his associates the Crown, believing them to be philosopher kings of Callipolis, and quickly took control of the cult. Under his leadership, the cult became more active, amassing great wealth and influence in the process, and they sought to enact change on a global scale. And all these years later, we know how that eventually ended up. Now, we get some extra information into the origin of the biophage, the creatures that we encounter throughout Callisto Protocol. In the early 1100s, numerous warrior tribes began to settle on the western coast of South America, within Peru. The city's name was Paramo. Built on the side of a volcano, the city flourished for hundreds of years, before completely vanishing without explanation. Wall carvings within Paramo suggested that the tribe may have collectively hurled themselves from the mountainside in a mass ritual sacrifice type of thing. Tough stuff, really. For the next 400 years, Paramo remained empty and essentially a ghost city that travelers could explore if they dared make the treacherous climb up the mountain to get there. However, that changed in 1982. A group of archaeologists led by a known occultist, Burton Northrop, travelled there in search of the reason for the city's population to just disappear as they did, taking upwards of 40 scientists with him to set up camp within the ruins of Paramo. Through the research they conducted, they figured out something unexpected. Based on written documentation and records within the city, the average lifespan of the Paramo people was roughly 120 years old, considerably higher than any other civilizations within the region. But what was most interesting is that there was absolutely no mention or description whatsoever of any illnesses in the writings. In fact, the Paramo people didn't even have a word in their language for disease. But how could that be possible? The team shifted their focus to this new mysterious topic, pondering questions as to how this could be. Was it something in the water supply, or possibly the surrounding air, or even a specific plant that only grew at this altitude? Or maybe the volcano that the city was built on had something to do with it, since the people named it the Molten Goddess. But unexpectedly over the course of the project, the scientists reported feeling more healthy and energetic themselves in a short time that they had spent at Paramo. They conducted blood tests, which backed up their suspicion. Researchers reported a lessening of all manner of symptoms, ranging from rheumatoid arthritis to depression. If the team could find out exactly what's causing this, it could be revolutionary. 2 years later in 1984, Dr. Burden Northrop went missing. Some reports suggest that Northrop descended into a feverish madness, even attacking his patron. To this very day, many speculate that his body was never found because he threw himself into the volcano. Decades later, humanity sees its first major moves towards interstellar colonization. The first breakthrough comes in 2128 with the creation of the Helium-3 mining facility on Earth's moon. A few decades after that, a colony has been established on Mars, and various corporations participated in the 22nd century space rush. By 2150, attempts at terraforming Mars were even underway, but that did end up failing spectacularly. The event was simply called the Mars Incident. The details of what happened on Mars in 2168 has not been revealed, but further colonization of the planet will be impossible for the next 6,000 years as a result of the failure. And due to this incident, the use of so-called strong AI was outlawed completely. However, despite this, by 2170, outposts such as the Helix Station as well as mining operations were being created throughout the Jovian system. And in 2244, it was on one of Jupiter's moons, Callisto, that the microbe was detected. This microbe caused horrific mutations in the miners stationed on Callisto. Reports describe the miners as covered in polyps and teeth. The mining operation was quickly closed and the site was covered up, as well as a cover story concocted for the public. The UJC quickly faced bankruptcy as a result, but they later found salvation from Earth, Callipolis specifically. The exact microbe found on Callisto that nearly sent the UJC into bankruptcy bore striking similarities to the pathogen found within Paramo, Peru, hundreds of years prior. Now, there were, however, not the same. There were differences, but the pathogen seemed to share a common ancestor. This caused Callipolis to invest in the UJC, saving them from bankruptcy, and began work on further researching the microbe. In 2250, black iron was constructed as a front for the original research program, since it would provide a constant flow of research subjects for Callipolis, and the UJC since the prison provided direct access to the colony below. The research, however, did not provide many answers, and in 2275, the research on Callisto was ended, having generated no positive results. If you are curious about what exactly happened within the colony and the research that took place back then, you can find all those details within the original video on the channel, which we already covered. However, Marla does go into detail about her involvement in Callisto, as she provides the information to Danny, including her confession. She explains that it was Cole that brought her to Black Iron, both members of Callipolis, though different in rank. She was simply a pawn, while Cole's family were Callipolis royalty, a lineage that can be traced back centuries to old Earth, to those who originally formed the crown. The crown is the highest rank within Callipolis, and due to his lineage, Cole believed that that rank was his birthright. However, despite everything he tried, he failed to rise above the rank of bishop. Marla felt that this wounded Cole's pride. He would claim his actions were motivated in honor of Callipolis' original purpose, to tend to the garden, and to cull the weak as it were, ensuring that humanity grew strong. But Marla believed his own personal ascent was his true obsession, to prove to Callipolis that he belonged with the crown. This obsession led him to uncover files related to the original Black Iron research program that ended nearly 50 years ago. He believed he found what they had missed or were too blind to see: the links between Callisto and the biophage. After centuries of searching, he felt he finally found the commonality. All of these inspired what happened at Black Iron, and the trinkets that he would collect are emblematic of his ego. The original codex of Death Makes No Mistakes, the masks of his Philosopher King's ancestors, a collection from previous great hunts, and even the molten goddess flower for Paramo, Burton Northrop's journal, and a portion of the Paramo meteorite itself, the source of the biophage. These artifacts of the past were used by Cole as an inspiration for a new approach to the Callisto ideas, choosing not to reactivate the original research program as he promised, instead opting to unlock the secret of the commonality by returning to the old ways. A great hunt, to test the group, cull the weak and see who the strong are, to find that one survivor. Marla did not want any part of that madness. She was brought to Black Iron under the belief that he would reactivate the original program, but it was just a lie. She made a critical choice to study the biophage scientifically, and she did, until her own mania took hold. She described it as a line, one that she wouldn't cross, but inch by inch that line would be drawn back, until she did cross her own line. Researching prisoners, the hybrid system, harnessing the power of humans and machines, and using the illegal strong AI to try and crack the biophage code. Comparing it to the feverish madness that claimed Burton Northrop centuries ago. She still doesn't know what about the biophage provoked such an obsession with her. Within her tests, infected subjects would claim that they could hear it, as if somehow the biophage was speaking to them inside their mind, as if it wanted something. Marla thinks that maybe she heard the voice herself, since there's no other explanation for her actions, accepting that she made her choices, and now she has to live with that, but believes that Cole will never see the error of his ways, since he is a true believer in the Callipolis methods, and to him what happened within Black Iron isn't a failure or a catastrophe. And unfortunately, from a certain point of view, he is correct. He honoured the vision of Rulon Cockart within Black Iron, and within it produced the lone survivor, which Cole was searching for all along. A pure strain of the biophage, a direct connection to the commonality. Because to Cole, the biophage is the commonality. And if he can find Danny, he will have everything that he wants. He cannot lose after that. Marla closes this statement by saying that this is why he needs to be stopped, that the truth needs to be revealed. Danny is the lone survivor, the strong rise above the weak, the Callipolis survivor of the Black Iron Great Hunt that Cole started. And now all of this information, with the help of the dying Jacob, has been sent to Danny via the link to hopefully be revealed. And with that ends the story of the Callisto Protocol DLC, Final Transmission. Something from a personal perspective I believe should have been part of the base game, but nonetheless here we are. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful at all, please remember to like and subscribe, and write the commonality in the comments down below to let me know that you made it to the end. If you are new here, we make all types of story explained content on the channel, and are slowly building up quite the catalogue of videos, so be sure to go and see if we cover any other games that you might be interested in. Until next time guys, peace.